Israel and Hamas have finally agreed to a ceasefire deal after months of delicate negotiations. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has tonight thanked President Biden and Donald Trump for helping secure the deal. With just days to go before he leaves office, President Biden tonight gave details of the ceasefire, which begins on Sunday.
Phase 1 will last 6 weeks. It includes a full and complete ceasefire, withdrawal of Israeli forces from all the populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, including women and elderly and the wounded. In exchange, Israel released hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. And during Phase 1, the Palestinians can also return to their neighborhoods in all the areas of Gaza.
So there are 3 phases to this deal. 33 hostages will be released during the first 6 weeks, among them 2 Americans. Humanitarian aid will go in. Phase 2 will be negotiations for a permanent end to the war. Hostages and prisoners will continue to be released. Once that's done, Phase 3 will see all the rest of the hostages released, as well as the remains of those who have died. And finally, a permanent ceasefire agreed. Our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, is in Jerusalem. And Jeremy, a huge moment after so many months of war.
Yeah, it's been a nightmare for all concerned, of course. And among some of the terrible consequences of what's happened have been as strong, and polls have shown this, a sense of dehumanization on both sides. A feeling among Israelis that because of everything that Hamas did on the 7th of October, how could they ever have peace with Palestinians? And a feeling among many Palestinians that how could they ever have peace with Israelis after everything Israel has done since the 7th of October 2023. A ceasefire like this obviously is going to be fragile, and there are more negotiations ahead. It is not going to be easy. It might well be difficult. I've spoken to senior Western diplomats who fear that after the first phase, the 42-day phase 1, that maybe the war might even resume. But of course, on a day like this, there has to be enormous relief on both sides. In the streets of Khan Yunis in Gaza, overwhelming relief that they are alive, and hope too that the nightmare of this war might be over.
When they announced that there is a ceasefire, we felt happy and relieved. The pain has disappeared a bit, even though the pain is still present, but hopefully joy will overcome the pain. Let our prisoners get freed and for the injured to get treated. People are exhausted.
Some weapons, some defiance were on show, but Hamas is a shadow of what it was when it attacked Israel on the 7th of October 2023. And apart from survival, there isn't much to celebrate for Palestinians in Gaza. Israel has killed almost 50,000 people at least. The territory is in ruins, and well over 2 million have been forced out of their homes. And in Tel Aviv, it is also a bittersweet moment for the families and supporters of Israeli hostages, living and dead. 33 women, older men, and the sick and wounded are due for release in the next 6 weeks, in return for hundreds of Palestinian detainees and prisoners. But the future of the rest of the hostages depends on more negotiations.
And we really hope that no one will mess it up, not in our side, not in their side. And we really wait for this very, very needed thing to happen, for the war to stop, for the hostages to come home.
Israel's president said the ceasefire was right, important, and necessary.
There is no greater moral, human, Jewish or Israeli obligation than to bring our sons and daughters back to us, whether to recover at home or to be laid to rest.
The war started on the 7th of October 2023 with a devastating series of surprise attacks by Hamas. It was one of the worst intelligence and security failures in Israel's history. A painful inquiry into who missed the signs it was coming, starting with the Prime Minister, lies ahead. 251 people were taken into Gaza as hostages. Hamas killed around 1,200, mostly Israeli civilians in their own homes. It took days to recover the bodies. Israel responded by hammering Gaza and its people. From then until today. It insists it respects the laws of war. It says Hamas caused so many civilian casualties, wounded and dead, by using them as human shields. But Israel's Prime Minister and former Defense Minister face arrest warrants for war crimes, and the International Court of Justice is investigating a case accusing Israel of genocide. In Washington, President Biden took credit for a diplomatic victory, celebrated America's support for Israel, and said the war had transformed the Middle East for the better.
This has been a time of real turmoil in the Middle East. But as I prepare to leave office, our friends are strong, our enemies are weak, and there's genuine opportunities for a new future. In Lebanon, there's an opportunity for a future, free from the grip of Hezbollah. In Syria, a future free from the tyranny of Assad. And for the Palestinian people, a credible pathway to a state of their own. Thank you.
Brooks, credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
But Donald Trump's pressure on Israel, as well as Hamas, to seal the deal before his return to the White House next week might have made a decisive difference. Joe Biden put the ceasefire plan on the table last May. With Gaza in ruins, the president's point that the Palestinians have a path to their own state is wishful thinking. Israel's government says security depends on military power, not allowing Palestinian independence. After 15 months of war in Gaza, the conflict, which has lasted more than a century, is as bitter and intractable as ever. With luck, the ceasefire will end this war. It does not end the conflict. The consequences of so much destruction and death will be felt for a generation at least. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Jerusalem.
The ceasefire begins on Sunday, the day before the inauguration of Donald Trump. In fact, he was the first to speak publicly about the deal before it had been confirmed by Qatar's Prime Minister, saying the hostages would be released soon. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, is in Washington. We've heard President Biden outlining the deal tonight. Tell us more about the timing of all this.
Well, the timing's critical because, as you say, it's coming just before Joe Biden leaves office and Donald Trump returns to the White House. And it's because it's coming at this critical time that it's really interesting to note that Joe Biden says that his team of negotiators and diplomats who've been so deeply involved in these talks for months have been working closely and coordinating with Donald Trump's Middle East envoy and his team so that they are all across all of the details. They all know what's happening because nobody wants this handover of power here in America to in any way derail the implementation of this agreement. And it's because Donald Trump and his team were being kept so closely informed of what was going on that he was able to post on his social media channel that a deal had been done before, as you say, it had been officially announced. And he wrote that this epic ceasefire agreement would not have been possible if it hadn't been for his election victory in November. Is that true? Well, people close to the negotiations say that his vague threats when he said that all hell would break loose if the hostages were not released before he returned to office, that they did put some pressure on the parties in the region to come to an agreement now, and that therefore it was helpful. But you heard Joe Biden speaking from the White House there. He does not want to give any of the credit to Donald Trump. He was, in that speech, very much trying to cement his own place in this deal, saying it was his framework that he put forward last May, that he has been deeply involved in the talks and the negotiations, the torturous discussions that have been going on for months. And yeah, you heard him there when he was asked if Donald Trump deserves any of the credit. He said, is this a joke? But the fact of the matter is it will be Donald Trump and his team that oversee the implementation of this deal, that move it into phase 2 and into phase 3. And he's got very different priorities in the Middle East than those that Joe Biden did have.
Sarah Smith, our North America editor. Thank you. Israel says that 94 hostages are still being held by Hamas, but more than 30 are thought to be dead. Tonight, as the news broke, families hugged each other in Tel Aviv in what's become known as Hostages Square. Our Middle East correspondent Lucy Williamson is there. Lucy.
Week after week, we've seen this square packed with protesters demanding the release of the hostages. Tonight, it's empty. A reminder perhaps of the caution many people feel here about this deal after so many disappointments, so many false starts. The clock that's been counting up the minutes, the hours, the days of captivity is still going, more than 466 now. But for many hostages and their families, they can finally glimpse an end to the ordeal, while some others still cannot. After the public anger and the protests, in Tel Aviv tonight, a private, shared relief. Too soon for celebrations. This deal too partial, too long coming to spark an explosion of joy. For 15 months, demonstrators here demanded the hostages' release. The names of Israel's missing, repeated like a mantra, their faces papering Israel's walls. Among them, 5-year-old Ariel and 1-year-old Kafir Bibas and their parents.
It's like a roller coaster. I'm not breathing right now. We don't know if they're on the list, if they're gonna come back in the first phase, if they're alive. If not, we actually don't know anything, so it's scary.
All living civilian women and children are due to be released over the next 6 weeks, along with elderly men and the sick. For now, soldiers and younger men will remain behind.
You know, it's part of them, not all of them. And for us, it's only the beginning. We want them all here, okay? Because it's not end and it's not enough if just some of them will come.
251 hostages were taken to Gaza by Hamas gunmen during the 7th of October attacks. Partygoers at a music festival, families asleep in their homes. And soldiers like Nimrod Cohen, abducted with his tank unit near the Nahal Oz military base. He was 19 years old. Since then, his father Yehuda has been campaigning for his release. He believes that Nimrod, a young male soldier, will be one of the last to be freed.
I'm done with emotion. That was the first month, the second month. I don't have time for emotion. I'm full job in fighting. I can be the father of Nimrod once Nimrod is back here. Now I'm fighting to be a father of Nimrod. I haven't talked to him for 15 months, seen him, heard him, okay? Somewhere in the dark, that's the thing. So I'm fighting to get back to be Nimrod's father.
Yehuda watched as more than 100 hostages were freed in an earlier 9-day truce. That was over a year ago. Since then, for many hostage families, hope has been frozen. Now, for some, it's starting to thaw. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Tel Aviv.
The United Nations said tonight humanitarian agencies have been mobilising supplies to get aid delivery into Gaza as quickly as possible. And it appealed for aid workers to be allowed safe, unfettered access to people desperately in need. Almost 47,000 people have died in Gaza since the outbreak of the war, according to the health ministry run by Hamas. BBC News has followed the stories of those struggling in a desperate humanitarian crisis. Our special correspondent Fergal Keane reports now on Gaza after more than a year of war. You may find some of the images distressing.
They're used to false rumours. Hope has been a lost language in this war. But tonight, perhaps an end to fear, exhaustion, degradation. They have suffered while the talk has gone on and on. Mahmoud al-Dibes and his family have evacuated 9 times. His children scavenge for anything that could be sold to buy food. And they suffer for it. Skin diseases, hepatitis. The smell is suffocating, he says, and the dogs are everywhere. There's nowhere to go to the bathroom, so at night my family and I went together to relieve ourselves, only to be attacked by dogs that tried to bite us. They lived here before the war. Jabalia. Bombed now into an age of stone. The consequences of the war stretched the length of Gaza and into every life in one way or another. Hanan Al-Qassas, aged 15, was born with a severe brain disability. But before the war there were working hospitals and days and nights without terror.
She was the flower of our neighborhood. She used to walk, play, and was just like any other child.
3 months into the war, Hannah became ill with cancer of the eye. Now in constant agony, she can no longer see. With a ceasefire, her mother hopes Israel will allow Hannah's evacuation from Gaza.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. I'm so worried about her, and I feel so bad for her. I want to do whatever I can to help her, and I don't want to be helpless.
Our journalists have recorded the stories of Gaza on the ground since the war began. Like the two sisters reunited in an emergency ward after their home was hit in an Israeli airstrike. My sister, my beloved, said Juri, aged 5. This is my sister, she tells the nurses. Julia is 18 months old. There was newborn baby Sabrine, rescued from her dead mother's womb after another airstrike. The baby is under medical care, said Dr. Mohammed Salama. She'll stay here 3 or 4 weeks. Sabrine lived only 5 days. Noara al-Najjar and her children, just after the Israeli strike that took her husband, their father Abdel Rahman, one of more than 70 people killed in an operation to rescue 2 hostages. His daughter Malak lost an eye in the attack. Pain, she says, I lost my father, enough. Noara was pregnant at the time and now has the couple's baby Rama. The ceasefire is welcome, but it's not the end of suffering.
After the ceasefire, I want to give my children the best life. I want them to get over the fear we lived. My children are really scared. The terror has settled in their hearts.
The scale of